Well, new tonight, there has been a lot of attention on the Manhattan Project this summer with the hit movie Oppenheimer in theaters. But one aspect of the project the film does not cover is the waste created when the atomic bomb was developed.
Now, for decades, a site in Niagara County has been the home of uranium, radium, and various other waste products from the Manhattan Project.
People in the area are still concerned about the health risks of the buried radioactive waste, as our Nate Benson learned in this Two on Your Side original report.
Grace Austin has lived in Niagara County her entire life.
Except for 1 year. We went to Arizona. I turned 5 in Arizona.
For nearly 8 years, Grace has been meticulously cataloging a list of familiar names.
Why do you keep the lists?
I guess it's a habit. I started with my class of 60, and then I said, why not just go and check on everybody else?
Names she grew up with or knew socially.
How many names are on your list now? And
I've got 8 pages. 8 pages. They're students, residents, bus drivers, teachers.
Hundreds of names, including members of her family.
My mom had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. My dad had lung and bone. My brother Russell's still living in Arizona. He's got colon cancer. My sister Linda, breast cancer. Mine's breast cancer.
The list contains the names of people who grew up in Lewiston, Porter, and Ransomville, near the former site of Lake Ontario Ordnance Works.
There are too many people passing away with, still living, passing away with cancers, just about every type you can imagine. And I wanted to know why.
The answer to that question of why is complicated.
Fighter plane in the Curtis Buffalo plant.
Western New York benefited greatly from wartime production in the 1940s. While a lot of attention is usually focused on the thousands of planes built in Buffalo or the countless tons of steel forged in Lackawanna, Niagara County also contributed mainly through its well-established chemical industry. In 1942, 7,500 acres of mostly farmland was taken by the federal government to create a TNT manufacturing facility called Lake Ontario Ordnance Works, also referred to as LOW. The factory produced 390,000 pounds of TNT every day when it went online in October 1942. But the facility only produced TNT for 9 months. After that, the site was used as a repository for waste created by the Manhattan Project. From all over the country, waste was shipped to Niagara County.
It was an open silo emitting radon gas in the community, radon particles.
Parts of that 7,500 acres were transferred or sold to various military divisions or private companies throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Parts of the former Low site were used as a boron fuel facility. And thanks to an influx of babies born after the war, a temporary school was established at a former Air Force Administration building on the Low site by the Lewiston Porter School District. The school operated from 1967 through 1970. 900 students attended the school.
It was an abandoned warehouse. The kids would have to walk out to go to the cafeteria for lunch. They'd have to walk outside to go to the gym.
Students were told not to play in the areas around the school.
You can't even walk in the grass.
It wasn't until the 1970s when testing at the Low site began, and it took decades for the public to become aware of the severity of the contamination. In 1986, the current interim waste containment structure was built using a basement of a former Low site building. It's now referred to as the Niagara Falls Storage Site.
I never questioned what was being stored there. I bought my house in '83 in Youngstown.
Vincent Agnello is the president of Residents for Responsible Government. He and others pushed for cleanup and accountability of the Niagara Falls Storage Site beginning in 2005.
To leave everything there the way they did and putting everybody at risk in this neighborhood, in this area, was outrageous. That should have never happened. There should have been recognition back then. This needs to be cleaned up. But again, it comes down to money and liability.
Despite the list of names that Grace has collected over many, many years, pinpointing the causes of those cancers has been challenging. New York State studied the levels of cancer near the former Low site between 1991 and 2000. While the study determined elevated levels of some cancers in men and children, none of them could be directly correlated to the exposure from radioactive waste in the Lewiston-Porter area.
And we know that exposure to uranium, radon, is a major health risk.
And for decades, the waste sat in open pits, or was stored in a silo, or was buried under a few feet of soil. Congressman Brian Higgins says his office has been calling on the State Department of Health to conduct a new cancer study.
Things have changed, new technology, forensics, a lot of other things to determine what the effect, if any, that exposure to that site as a worker, as a resident in close proximity has had. So we have an obligation to keep trying.
And in terms of accountability and possible compensation, Higgins says he will push for that too.
If that has been determined to cause illness, death, in some circumstances for people that went to school in close proximity to that site, who have worked there, who live there, we have a moral obligation to do that.
In terms of cleaning up the Manhattan Project waste that is stored in Niagara County, coming up tomorrow at 6, I take a tour of the site and talk to the engineers about how they plan to move 390,000 tons of radioactive waste. On your side, Nate Benson, Channel 2 News.